Question number 2, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr Speaker, this question is to the Prime Minister and asks, does he stand by all his statements? If so, why?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes, and because I do.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
How is Auckland going to solve its housing supply problems when demand is inflated by 34,000 people coming into Auckland from overseas every year? Every year. Every year. When they stop, I'll keep going.
Order. Order. There is too much interjection, and there's one member particularly who's continuing to interject. I can name him if that would help quieten him down. Mr Peters, start the question again.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How is Auckland going to solve its housing supply problems when demand is inflated by 34,000 people coming into Auckland from overseas every year? Or is this, to quote him, and I do, hardly some sort of crisis that we cannot cope with, end of quotes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, some of those people who come in actually come in with skills that can be applied in this particular area of housing. Secondly, Mr Speaker, if you look at the construction workforce, which has grown 40,000 in the last 2 years and nationally 24,200 in Auckland, the reality of a fast-growing Auckland, partly because of population growth, both internally and externally, has added to a great deal of economic activity and job opportunities for New Zealanders.
Supplementary question.
Order. Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
How is Auckland going to solve its now massive roading infrastructure problems when half the population of New Plymouth, or 34,000, are coming into Auckland from overseas every year now?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, the government, as the member should know, has been massively investing in infrastructure in Auckland, spending a great deal, not only just in roading, but in public transport. The Speaker spending billions, I think $4 billion gone to Kiwi Rail in the time that we've had that, and that's included electrification of lines in Auckland, additional rolling stock and the likes. The government's committed to its share now of the CBD rail tunnel. The government's also invested in very large roading projects like Waterview.
Supplementary question.
Order. Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
How is Auckland going to solve its education and health supply problems when the demand for education and health services is inflated by 34,000 long-term arrivals from overseas going to Auckland each year, let alone those who come from the rest of the country?
The Right Honourable Prime
Mr
Minister.
Speaker, firstly, many of the people that go to Auckland are New Zealanders returning who decide to come from overseas because, like myself, they worked in another part of the world and they realised what a great place New Zealand is. And under a national-led government, there are so many reasons for them to come back and be part of Auckland and part of New Zealand, and reasons to celebrate that.
Supplementary question.
Order. Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Eat your heart out, Jerry. Supplementary question. They've never asked you, mate.
Order. 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 I know the member's responding, but on this occasion, can we have the supplementary question?
Supplementary question. Prime Minister, if the latest household economic survey reports that every income decile has declined in home ownership except for the top 10%, when will he start governing for all New Zealanders and not just his rich mates?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, if one looks at generally those who think the country is going in the right direction versus the wrong direction, the member will see that substantially the number of people thinking the country going in the right direction outnumbers those that are going in the wrong direction. They are New Zealanders from all parts of the country and with all different economic cohorts. I think that answers the member's question.
Order. Order. Question number 3, Todd Muller.